The British Virgin Islands. When you see these images, you think of sun, sea, ultimate relaxation, a picture-perfect holiday. But for our guest this evening, this isn't just a home from home. It's a massive, massive task in which he intends to fully accomplish. In this episode of Global Football, TTM Sports have a discussion with Daniel Neville about his current role of Technical Director of the British Virgin Islands FA and also his secondary job as the Assistant Manager of the national team, currently ranked 208th in the world by FIFA. We discuss what the beautiful game looks like in these Caribbean islands, the challenges from qualifying for major tournaments, the impact of the deadly Hurricane Irma, to being in the opposite dugout to the legendary coach in goose hitting. So sit down, strap yourself in, and listen to the wonderful sounds of the TTM podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 8 of the TTM podcast, the Global Football Series. And today we have a very special episode where we invite Daniel Neville, the Technical Director for the British Virgin Islands FA. Daniel, welcome to the TTM podcast. How are you?
Yeah, well, good. Thanks. Thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Obviously, I'm here today with my co-host James, going through this football series where we open the eyes to some obscure places around the world, really, in our global football series, and actually bringing it out into the open, where it usually wouldn't see the light of day, to be honest with you, in mainstream football domains. So let's talk about your career, Dan. Where did it start? How did football start for you?
First team was Hamworthy United.
Okay.
So wasn't quite good enough for my own age group, so I actually got put up an age group because they had less players. I mean, now you'd go up an age group because you were the best player. At the time, I went up an age group because they didn't have enough. And had some reasonable experiences. I mean, my first game, we played a team called Portland, and we lost 18-0. 18-0. It's pouring down the rain, pitch was really muddy, and it was at a time where everyone used to turn up dressed in their kit. So a bit like they're doing now with the lower leagues with COVID. And our goalkeeper wasn't allowed to get muddy. So unless a shot was at him, he had to let it in because his mum wouldn't let him in the car if he was muddy afterwards. That was my first recollection of football, really. And then, stuck at it. You sort of get bit by the bug and improved a little bit. And then when I was 14, I went into AFC Bournemouth Centre of Excellence. Did okay there. In year 11 at school, I had Hodgkin's disease, which is cancer of the lymph node. So unfortunately, I had to stop playing for 7 or 8 months. I didn't take my exams. As a result of that, then I couldn't do a scholarship, or I didn't get offered a scholar because at the time I wasn't fit. So I got myself back fit playing, went on trial at Leyton Orient, did okay. Then Barry Hearn comes in and makes a few changes. So I ended up going back to Bournemouth for a bit. And then from there, I played non-league. I played for Poole Town, Bournemouth Poppies. I managed Bournemouth Poppies, Bashley, Brockenhurst. And then at Bournemouth Poppies, I was working, our manager at the time was Sean Brooks, who actually was the one that got me into coaching. And then I remember he got me an interview for a Centre of Excellence job at Bournemouth. And I've been coaching, I was just on my level 2 at the time. And so I went for the interview for the under-10s assistant. And then I got informed I wasn't successful, the 10s assistant, but I ended up with the 11s lead. And I was like, oh, right, okay. So I went in for an assistant's job, and I was nervous about that. So then, it's like, you're under 11s lead coach at Bournemouth. And then I was given Andy Marsh, hugely experienced coach. He was great. And Mike Davis, another experienced coach. They were with me, but I was like the lead coach because I could get there every week, and because their business and teaching commitments, they couldn't. But what they didn't tell me was that Andy went to America for six weeks over the summer. So pre-season, he wasn't there because he was away. And then Mike Davis was busy, so I was in at the deep end there. But no, it was it was good, and you adapt because you have to. I remember sat in the staff meeting on my induction almost, and it's like some hugely experienced coaches in the room, and I remember thinking, oh wow, a lot they're talking above my head, the books they had read, and and I'm thinking I've never actually read one. I've just played really and just watched people. And, before long, you watch and learn and you're around good people. And yeah, that was sort of got me into coaching really. And actually getting into coaching probably finished me playing. I finished playing. I was player manager of Bournemouth Poppies. And, you come in the dressing room at half time, you'd be one down. You'd want to give some people some honesty, but actually you've probably been one of the worst players.
Yeah.
Quickly you have to decide what you want to do. So stop playing. That was when really I probably would have started looking at myself more as a coach. So that sort of stopped me playing. And then did my B licence, and on my B licence, Joe Roach was the academy manager. Dean May was the 16s, 15s manager. And they pulled me to one side and Dean was like, "Oh, what do you do for Bournemouth?" And I said, "I'm the 11s." And he said, "Well, next season you're going to assist the 15s with me." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay." I mean, I was 26 at the time, so not massively older than in the group that I was working with. And he was a goalkeeping assessor as well. So again, on the first night with him, he wasn't there. So, that's another one where, really in at the deep end. And then he comes back in and he's someone to sort of really learn off. So that, I think, I'm sure it'll unfold later, but later on, the career's been very, very logical, but it's been a completely illogical way, the way everything's happened. I think
it's brilliant. I think the title that you have at the moment is outstanding. I think all of us who are football purists who love football, that the British Virgin Islands link is incredible. I think it's outstanding, actually. As a matter of fact, you should be proud of yourself, to be honest. It's really good.
It come across like really randomly how that, if you want me to go in now to how that came across. So, so I was 15, 16s at Bournemouth, then assisted the 18s as well. And then I had a little break because I had two young daughters. And then I went back in and was deputy manager for the Sports Trust, deputy head. Then from there, we sort of head of talent ID. And people like Eddie Howe and Jason that were manager and assistant at the time. I used to run a session on a Wednesday evening for all their kids. So you'd have Steve Purchase is now assistant manager. His two boys came. Jason Tyndall's son came. Eddie Howe's son came. The Russian owner Maxim's son and daughter came. The chief exec Neil Blake, his two of his sons came. So I used to do a session for him, and just used to put the session on a Wednesday. And to be honest, from where I live in Bournemouth, although it's only an hour away, it was really awkward for me to get there. But I just love being around. You're around people like Perchy, Jason, Eddie. Proper football people. Even for the, it's great working with their kids first and foremost. But even that 10-minute conversation you'd have at the end, you'd always pick something up, and you'd speak about the game on Saturday. And even for that, it was beneficial. And then one night, we're running a session on the first team training ground, and this fella comes sort of waltzing across the first team training pitch, and looks like Lovejoy, the old antique dealer. And I'm thinking, not one of our parents. Who can this be? And he's like, "Oh, I'm looking for Eddie Howe." And I was like, "Well, he's not here." And he goes, "Oh, where is he?" And I said, "Well, that light on up there, that's his office." And, "Oh, great. How do I get there?" And it's like, "Well, he's a Premier League manager. You don't just, walk in and sit down and have a chat. If you don't mind me asking, what's it about?" And he said, "Oh, we want to link with the British Virgin Islands." And I said, "Well, the first team probably wouldn't do that. They're Russian owned with American investors." So I said, "I'd imagine their international commitments would probably lie there." Yeah. And he goes, "Oh, no, we've got loads of good young kids with the Virgin Islands. I want to look at them." And I said, "Well, as that happens, I run the talent ID centres, so I'm probably not a bad point of contact." So we swapped emails, didn't hear anything. 2 weeks later, you get an email back. "Nice to meet you." And you think, okay. Then like 6 weeks later, you don't hear anything. And we have loads of these conversations on a weekly basis. 99 out of 100 fizzle out. And then he said, "Oh, our president's coming across. He'd like to meet you." So I booked a box. We met the president, got on like a house on fire. We had a good 3 hours just talking all things football. And we decided the best course of action would be to run a camp. So we arranged to run a camp out there for Bournemouth, and then we could look at all their players and their, in their home environment. Sometimes that's when you see the best of them.
Yeah,
so we arranged camp for the July. This was in the January. In the March, I left my Bournemouth role because I run a company called Champion as well. And it got to the point where I probably have to give up one of them. Now, Bournemouth will always be there, but the Champion company, we go into rural areas. We work with kids that may not get access to coaching. So I felt if I come out of that, then we deprive a lot of people. So morally, I had to stay at Champion. I felt having built it up. So I went into that, still arranged it for Bournemouth to run it. And then Joe Roach, the academy manager, left, and no one wanted to make the decision to actually go. So in the end, Bournemouth said to me, look, we can't really send anyone out because there's no one really in charge at the moment. You know, everyone's on tenterhooks that if they make the decision and the new man comes in, they get questioned. So they weren't going to go. So I phoned the president and said, look, I'm really, really sorry, but they're not coming. And he's like, oh, right, okay. He goes, can you come out? And I said, well, if you want me to. And he goes, can you bring someone with you? So I brought Kev Braybrook, was a good friend of mine. He's a pro license coach. So we sent him our CVs. Within about 10 minutes, he said, yeah, come over. So we went and did the week. The week was great. Kids were great. And I wrote him a little action plan of how I felt that they could develop. And he said, that's absolutely brilliant. Problem is, got no one to do it. No one to deliver this plan. Can you deliver the plan? And I said, well, probably not me, but what I can do is I can send a coach out and we'll just liaise from England. Yeah, good idea. Then Hurricane Irma hits September 2017, absolutely obliterates the place. And we actually ended up taking 3 of their players to Bournemouth, and they stayed in a boarding school in Bournemouth because they had, the home was wrecked. And we started coaching their players, and the players reacted really well to coming to England. And then in February 2018, I was offered the assistant national team coach job. He said, you want to do it? And I said, yeah, definitely. And they're like, well, we haven't talked about the contract or the terms. And I was like, I don't need the contract or the terms. I'll do it. That's not important to me. What an opportunity. Yeah. So we run a cat. So we brought them over to a place called Milton Abbey, which is in Blandford. And the squad was picked for us because obviously we had no knowledge of the players really. Yeah. So we had the squad. Really, really interesting camp for 2 or 3 points, actually. The first point was we played Weymouth in a friendly. And after about 15 minutes, we're 3-0 down. And I looked at John Riley and said, if this ain't 10 before half time, we're going to be really, really lucky. And we ended up, I think it was 5-0 at half time, miles away from where we should be. And we had 3 or 4 young players on the bench that we just actually invited to the week just to be around it. And actually, we put them on and we were so much better with those 4. They really grasped their opportunity. So that was the first point really that they did well. But then there was a couple of other bits, like the lads are slipping and sliding, and it's a wet March in England, but they're all wearing molds. Yeah. So I spoke to John and said, well, perhaps we should have told them that. Why on earth in the Caribbean would you want a metal stud? You'd never ever wear it. It's like 35 degrees every day.
Absolutely.
So that's one of those things where you think, don't take things for granted. We probably took for granted that they would just bring that. And they didn't. So that was like a learning curve for us. That actually things that you take as a norm maybe aren't the norm. So you have to look at absolutely everything. And then moving on from that, probably even more of a poignant point that maybe people that have worked around, in other countries would understand. On the Thursday after the game, we did a secret Santa. So you had art, craft, so you could either make someone something. And I wrote a poem to one of the players. Okay. So I wrote this poem. It's obviously anonymous. And the player had to read it out. And it was a random player about the other one. And, and he was struggling to read it. Like, my handwriting's not great, but like literacy, numeracy wasn't a great strength of his. Great player, great lad, works in construction, very, very good builder, but come from an era where, schooling at the time maybe wasn't so important. And I remember thinking, blimey, I spent a whole week doing PowerPoints. I spent a whole week putting things on the board for people to read. Yeah. Not for 1 minute did I ever think that perhaps that might not be the way they learn. So that camp was like a massive learning curve. Yeah. For us in terms of, don't take things for granted, work to them, not the other way around. If the player, some players may not respond to stuff that's written, then it needs to be verbal. Some might need to be shown. So we sort of knew that anyway, because we've been coaching quite a while, but that really sort of hit home. And I remember when we did the second camp, we were much, much better prepared for absolutely every scenario, and to make sure that we gave every player the very, very best opportunity of understanding what we want from them.
Yeah, it's like you've had to start literally from scratch. Whereas, from the outside looking in, you'll be thinking, right, first thing I'm going to do is, right, how are we going to climb that, the global ranking system? How are we going to get away from the foot of that table and make our way up? Where actually, when you really look at it, you're doing PowerPoints, and some of them are, literacy, they can't really read and write very well. So actually, the very last thing on your mind at that time is going to be the global rankings. So it's such a different way of looking at football because there's so much more involved. I think it's really, really interesting, actually. In terms of your squad selection now, James, you got a couple of questions to ask about that?
Yeah, so you mentioned obviously the first time, Dan, the squad was almost provided for you. At that particular time, would the squad have been made up primarily of players playing in the domestic league?
It would have probably been a fair mix. Now, what we found was, and I suppose we have to be careful a little bit what we say, we had players in the squad. So we had some expatriates because there's a massive financial services
Absolutely.
Economy over there, just because of obviously, it's so you get a lot of expats, and the what I found was the expats probably showed a little bit more pride and a little bit more understanding of the opportunity they had than maybe some of the locals we had in the squad. So I think historically, for all intents and purposes, when the age you got selected, and what we need to come away from, and what we felt we needed to come away from, we wanted people that fully understood the opportunity that they were given, and we wanted to see immense national pride. And what we found is with the younger players, their national pride is absolutely unbelievable. They absolutely love their country, that, they would do anything. And now more so we transitioned away from expatriates more, and we've got a very, very, I say island-based teams. A lot of them have relocated to other areas in the Grove, maybe because of Hurricane Irma, because of schoolings. We've got a younger group. So it's a very, very local team now, although they may not be playing in the domestic leagues. The other issue we had with domestic leagues after Irma, we didn't have a pitch. So we didn't have 11 aside for maybe a year. So it was small-sided football.
What did you do? Was it on an AstroTurf or a 3G or something?
Small-sided football on an AstroTurf. Cedar School was the international school on the island, were good enough to allow us to use their Astro, and that was what we used until the pitch was that done. I mean, Irma was that strong. The wind took the 3G off the ground.
Jesus.
Yeah.
It was. It absolutely ravaged the entire region and was still going as it made landfall in Florida, if I remember correctly. It was massive. It was huge. Yeah. And to rip the 3G out of the surface, that's something you don't really want to be caught in. Do you know what, Dan? You've had to build this from scratch.
Yeah, it almost does feel like that. It feels like that. I mean, we had Ryan Martin of FC Loudon on Friday, and he spoke about similar situation in a way where they took over the franchise of Cincinnati under John Harkes. He was the assistant there, and they had to build it from scratch. Just the squad, really. This is building the whole infrastructure from the ground up. Not just the players. It's building literally. It's almost like a complete blank canvas. Yeah. It's an incredible task. I mean, we had to build everything because the schools league was very, very strong before Irma. We're maybe 1,000 kids. Yeah. But then after Irma, you reset from zero again, and it's just getting back now, thanks to the, tremendous hard work of the local coaches and the local community, that we've actually, the stadium pitch is done, the 3G is back. We expect the stadium to be finished end of next year. The stadium's going to be a magnificent stadium. I think one of the best in the Caribbean because it's new.
What's the capacity on it?
The capacity, I think, is 4,500. Yeah, which obviously is small, but our population is at 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's spot on.
And you're close to the pitch, and we've had a really good say in some of the aspects of the stadium that we want from a football and a technicals perspective. So the stadium's well on the way. The pitch is done. We've just done extensive work on the pitch in Virgin Gorda. Virgin Gorda is like the second biggest island.
Okay.
So there's a grass pitch there that's, I shouldn't say second biggest island, actually. There's some friendly rivalry. BVI, joint biggest island. There's a grass pitch there as well. There's had a lot of work on it, and there's some really good local coaches, and the drive for football on Virgin Gorda is really good. And there's a lot of players that come off Virgin Gorda now.
And also in terms of, obviously, the league isn't going to be broadcast locally. There won't be any television deal or anything like that. But are you getting any local investment at all into the league from any local business, or is the FA made up? Is it state-owned, basically? Is it all run by the state?
Yeah, the FA are probably quite unique in terms of, I've never known an association do so much for its people. We pick players up, we drop them off, we have buses.
Yep.
Kids get fed, the kids get drinks. The FA run the schools leagues. The FA are going to be running the Academy Youth League that we're starting. The FA run the Men's National League, the Women's National League that we've got starting within the next 6 weeks. They run that as well. So we run absolutely everything. And sponsorship is the next thing really on the agenda, because the product now is quite good. Standard of National League has improved a lot. It's one of the youngest national leagues now. We've got a lot of players in our youth system that are actually playing at the top level in the country, sort of week in, week out now. I think we're just looking at streaming, and we've just done a deal with AO cameras, so there'll be analysis at all games as well, which I think would be a major advancement for the players to have the ability to log into the system, watch their games, do their own clips. You know, is
it professional, Dan? The level is it?
No,
so it's amateur.
Still be classed as amateur, actually. Yeah, but people take it, really seriously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. If it was for my country, I'd play for free, and and that's what it should be. You should feel pride and feeling that shirt and the badge touch the top of your chest, and that's when you should get. You run through brick walls for your country, and then that seems to be the attitude that you're getting out of these players.
Yeah,
in, BVI.
So when you're when you're looking at putting together a squad, Dan. Obviously you've got the domestic league, which I'm sure you're watching games all the time in the domestic league. You'll probably know every player. Is it 8-team league?
11
now. You'll be aware of every player in that league, no doubt. Obviously you looking elsewhere, I've noticed you've got some players in the lower leagues, the non-league system in this country, for example. How do you go about finding these players who may potentially be eligible to represent the BVI?
I mean, it's a really difficult one. In actual fact, what I'd add on our domestic league, we know all the players, but because of the FIFA statutes, you need a UK passport, and then your mum, dad, nan or granddad on either side needs to have been born there, or you need to have lived there for a couple of years in your lifetime. So if you haven't got those things, then you can't actually represent the country. So we've got 2 players, Jamal Sargent, and 3 players, Kevin Fisher and Sheldon Harry. 3 top players that would absolutely be in our squad. But because they haven't got a British passport, because I think Kevin was moved here when he was 2, he's like 23 now, then they're not eligible to play. Yet someone from the UK that might have moved there for financial services to work as an accountant or a lawyer
can play for him
2 years and be eligible.
Yeah, it's not right.
So incredible. Kevin Fisher actually plays rugby for the BVI because the RFU statutes are different to the FIFA statutes. So he can play rugby legally, but he can't play for us. Now, FIFA have actually just changed the statute last week. So we've got like our people reading through the statutes because they're not clear. They're very well written, but you could read them 10 times and get 8 different scenarios. So
that's FIFA for you.
It's like the Conservative Party are running the coding.
It's very, very similar to that. So we're just looking through those. But my understanding is if you're a belonger, you might be able to be selected now. Now, that would be a real game changer for us because if we could pick the 11 best players on the island, we'd be really strong. So at one point we could do that, and we were about 150th in the world when we could pick belongers. But obviously that changed because of the FIFA statute. So you've got an island of 24,000 people, and in our national league, there's probably only 3 or 4 players on each team that would be eligible, and some of them could be late 30s. Some of them could start late 30s or 16.
Very difficult.
Players in the UK. And keeping tabs on people is really important. So we've got 3 in the US. We've got 1 in New Zealand who isn't quite legal yet, but he will be because he's just, I think there's a 5-year process for his passport. And he's on the way. We've got 1 in Scotland that's playing for Motherwell, Lawton Green. Again, he's 16, not eligible yet, but will be because his brother's actually in New Zealand. I think his brother actually might be even in Scotland now as well. Then we've got 1 in Spain, Alejandro Santos. So we did a camp the other week and he managed to be able to come over. We keep an eye on him regularly. There's no football in Spain at the moment. So we're sending him out a programme that he can just go and complete. We've got a player in the Netherlands, Liam Block, who again is playing again now. because obviously Holland, Dutch football's up and running. So every week we'll have a conversation. Just so, how long did you play for? What position did you play? Who did you play against? How did you feel you did? Obviously, asking the player how we did could be dangerous, but, we asked that for a bit of honesty, and then we've got obviously several players now that have moved from the island over to the UK that a lot of them we've managed to relocate to Dorset, a lot of the younger ones, and we've got a school that we run. So a lot of them are in our school, and they train every day, so we can keep a really close eye on them. And then we've got one in London, Tosh Gallimore. Then we've got one in the north of England as well. And then weekly we're in contact with them.
So what does your typical day look like as technical director / assistant of the British Virgin Islands? What does it look like? What do you go through a routine, for instance?
No, not it's cyclical, really. In normal times, I would spend probably 3 weeks in the UK, 1 week in the BVI. Obviously, because we've got quite a few players over here now, and they're national level type players, then it's important that I can see both camps in action. So during non-COVID times, it'd be 3 weeks here, 1 week in the BVI. If we're preparing for a tournament, it might be slightly different. COVID times, I tend to get up fairly early and run the champion stuff till about 1 o'clock. And then 1 o'clock here is 8 o'clock in the Virgin Islands. And then the sort of day starts and we have, a video call most days. We're sending out the coaching program. I ask for pictures, then we speak to the media people. So it's a very administrative type role. CONCACAF and FIFA have been absolutely brilliant over COVID as well. I'm a new technical director. And it did strike me a little bit that you did have a little bit of autonomy before. And autonomy is great if you're really, really keen and experienced. If you're not, then, sometimes you can get away with stuff. What I found is that like every week we're doing something for CONCACAF. We're doing a bilateral program at the moment, and there's a Zoom call every week, and the Zoom calls are quite intense. So the preparation needs to be good. And they're examining all areas of our FA, which is good because we want the support. We're also doing a talent ecosystem program. So that, coupled with the fact that I'm a new technical director, I got my email from my mentor. So I've read the email and I was like, oh, no way, it can't be. And it was Steve McLaren. So I phoned Gareth Jennings, who's head of technical leadership for FIFA. So he's in charge of all the technical directors. And I said, before I respond to this email, is it the Steve McLaren?
Yeah, absolutely.
Steve McLaren. And we've had 3 or 4 really, really good conversations, actually. And it was well, absolutely brilliant.
With Steve McLaren, I was listening to him, the Crystal Palace against Manchester United match. I was listening to it on the way in from work the other day. He was doing the co-commentary, and when you actually sit down and listen to Steve McLaren speak, he speaks a lot of sense.
Yeah,
really, really, really knowledgeable guy. He's actually quite witty with what he says as well. I think he really is, and I think obviously what happened with England happened. But, when you look at his career as a whole, he's done very well at FC Twente. Done extremely well there, actually. And that's really, really good that you've got that connection with Steve McLaren, because he's actually got some weight behind him as well, hasn't he? So it's fair play to you.
Yeah, his knowledge is incredible. Very affable. Very interested in what we're doing as well. So he's been very good. Massively helpful for us. And then we've got Jason Roberts as well, who is director, CONCACAF director of development. Obviously, he's to play for
ex-Wigan, and
hugely helpful for us as well. He's very accessible to everyone in the region. But we've leaned on him and we've asked him questions, and he's been great for us as well. So we've done quite well, but we've had a lot of support from some unbelievable people as well.
So had you, when you took this role on, Dan, had you ever actually been to the British Virgin Islands before?
No, when he said it was the British Virgin Islands, that's who I'm from. If I'm honest, I had to think, is that a club or a country?
Yeah.
Oh, really nice. Where's that then? And he said, it's in the Caribbean. So and then I went home and Googled it. And before we did the camp, I did extensive research so I could tell you, per capita income, population.
Of course.
So I made sure that I was quite well researched, and obviously music's a big part there. So I spent most of the plane journey researching musicians And when I got there and asked people about him, I still don't think anyone's heard of who I was researching.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier in the week, because obviously, you know, we've had it planned for a little while, and we've been really looking hard online at the British Virgin Islands, and that is somewhere where down the road we want to get out there and we want to watch that national team play.
Absolutely.
I'd love you to come out. Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
we want to do that. And then what we also want to do is to provide a platform. Our listeners will be listening now thinking this is an incredible football chat. For the purist, this is a great football chat. With yourself as well, James, I know you want to get on in a minute with talking about the CONCACAF World Cup, how that sort of works, Nation League. For yourself, do you think that you will actually take the plunge and maybe one day look at assuming that managerial job on the international scene with BVI?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't be national team coach. I mean, I prefer the technical director role. I think they're very different roles now. You're not actually allowed to be both.
Okay.
Yeah, FIFA do say that it is a very separate role. So I'm obviously looking after the short, medium, long-term plan on behalf of the executive committee, whereas a national team coach is preparing for the next game.
Yeah.
I would say probably my strength probably lies in more the administration and overall organisation. And, you know, John Riley, you know, has done very well as a national coach, and, you know, we give more support, and he's a good guy as well. I think you never say never.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I don't think you'd ever say no, but at the moment, I'm quite happy, you know, playing the role that I do, because I think that probably suits me a little bit more, actually.
So with this role, Dan, obviously, relatively young guy still as well, still learning the game. Are you looking to use this as potentially a bit of a springboard into future roles? When I look at Gary White as somebody, for example, former manager of the BVI, used it as a real springboard, went on a fantastic journey around Asia, Guam, Chinese Taipei. Eventually, I was quite impressed to see that he'd managed to springboard himself to land the job at Tokyo Verdy, as well as jobs in China. Quietly to yourself, do you think, you know, I can get my foot in the door maybe at a bigger nation, or are you solely focused on the BVI project?
Yeah, I think once I undertake a role, I mean, my football jobs have been at those various roles. I was at Bournemouth for 16 years. I was a lecturer on the football development programme at Solent for 12 years, and I've had champion for 8 years. So I'm not really one to, you know, I think you've either got to commit long term to a project or go the other route and have 2 years at each job and move around. But I actually prefer, you know, I definitely wouldn't see myself coming away at the moment. You know, we've got a strategic plan till 2024, and, you know, I'd love to see the plan out to 2024 and beyond. Obviously, I won't be here forever. You know, football transitional, and I think, you know, we're all passing through it to some extent.
Yeah,
but for the moment, I don't think, you know, having gone through, I wouldn't say we've gone through pain, because we haven't gone through pain, but we've gone through a lot of hard work to get it where it is. I wouldn't want to now come away after we've done all that hard work. I'd really like to see the project through, and I think I owe it to, you know, the president and the executive committee, and I think every player and every parent that showed a little bit of faith in me coming from unknown. I don't think now I could go and, you know, I think I owe them to stay and give it my absolute best shot.
Well, look, it's loyalty, isn't it? And loyalty is respected in any profession in the world. Absolutely. So. No doubt about it. Is, you know, obviously your long-term plan, is it now something you're looking at? Now what you've done is you planted the seed, and those seeds are now starting to grow. Do you anticipate that you will try to have some sort of an assault and try to get up them world rankings, or is that still at the moment not really on the agenda? It's just about really developing the country in terms of its footballing ambition and goals.
Yeah, I think probably, you know, we've got, when we played Bahamas, our second half team against Bahamas, that we actually drew 0-0 in the second half, we had, I think, 8 players under the age of 19, of which 7 played in the CONCACAF under-17s in 2017, which was my first entrance to them, really.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, if you're blooding those young players, that and points don't usually come hand in hand. Sometimes you might get 2 at once, but not usually. So if we took the short-term view of just going for points to close the nations, I think you're forever in transition. So our aim is, you know, we'll take a hit now. You know, we're going to persevere with the players. We're going to back the players. And once we start winning, I think we'll keep winning. I mean, Bahamas, 253 appearances in their team. We had 68. You know, we're playing Guatemala in our first World Cup qualifier. Guatemala's centre midfielders, I think, have got 79 and 60 caps. So their 2 players have got double the amount our team are going to have. But if you look at like Tyler Forbes, for instance, who was 17, I think he's played 8 games now. So you look at him playing 8 games. By the time he's 25, he's going to play 50.
That's incredible.
50 games. And there's a lot of players around his age. So I think by the time we get to 2024, we might have about 500-600 appearances in the group. And the average age is still only going to be 27. We'll win a lot of games when we get to that. You know, France won the World Cup with that stats.
Yeah. So,
so go on.
With the obviously you touched on the World Cup qualifying. How does the structure work in obviously the CONCACAF? Could you potentially be like we have in Europe, where you get your San Marinos and they get plunged into a group with Germany? You see, and then they'll go and get done 8-0 in at Dortmund's ground or whatever. Or will you be in sort of like a regional based initial sort of preliminary group to get into the latter sort of stages of the qualifying? How does it work?
Yeah, we'll go into a preliminary group, but the preliminary group, if you're San Marino, will be teams like Denmark and Sweden. So, you're not playing teams around you. How it works is you have 4 or 5 pools, depending on the competition, and we're in pool 5.
Yeah.
So we'll have a team from pool 4, team from pool 3, team from pool 2, team from pool 1. So World Cup qualifiers this year is probably the best chance anyone's ever going to get because of COVID and the window to qualify is a lot shorter. We're now actually only 6 games away from qualifying for Qatar. We're in a group of 4. If we progress out of the group of 4, then we'll have a straight playoff against either US, Jamaica, Mexico, Honduras, Ecuador, one of those types.
You want Honduras, don't you? You want Honduras. You want Honduras. I would want Honduras, not Mexico.
No, you don't want them.
So our group, the first one we pull out is Guatemala. Now, Guatemala have been 1 game away from qualifying for the last 3 tournaments because they've been, they got fined and expelled for corruption, I believe.
In a South American country, South Central African country, or American, I find that hard to believe.
So they had I think they had a ban of maybe a year to 2 years, and they've come back in and they put them in the bottom pool. So they put them in the bottom pool and we pull them out. So your bottom pool is always going to be USVI, Turks and Caicos, who else? Anguilla, French and Martin. Yeah, those type of teams that you've got a chance against because they're other small nations. We pull Guatemala that'll have 35,000 there, But in actual fact, then we've got St. Vincent away, who are in the qualifiers for the Gold Cup. Then we've got Cuba away in Havana. Massive game. And then we finish with Curacao, who got to the last quarterfinal of the Gold Cup, who had just employed Gus Hiddink. So we've got them at our place. Gus Hiddink could be in the opposite dugout.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
So 4 games. The reality is, if you can go and at the end of the 4 games, your goal difference is less than -20.
Dan, I'm going to have to say this. You're living my football manager dream. You are literally living. We've all been there at 2:00 in the morning. The wife's gone to bed. The kids are asleep. You're there at St. Kitts and Nevis. You're giving everything just to qualify, and you're actually doing it. This is brilliant. Please don't lose contact with the TTM podcast. Let's just leave that there. Okay, good stuff. James.
Matt. So, how many are you going to beat Curacao by then?
Yeah, Curacao is going to be tough. I mean, I think he's looked at us and going to come for a point, to be honest. So it's how we're going to break him down. I mean, there'll be tough games, but the good thing is there's going to be very little online about us, but there's going to be a hell of a lot on them online because they're big countries, and we're going to have 8 or 9 players that are going to be playing a good standard week in, week out. So I actually think we'll be quite competitive. I think we'll come up a little bit short, just because of the age of the players, and we're going to be a little bit experienced. But I think after these 4 games, then when we get to September, we get to Nations League qualifiers again. We'll have some games that you perceive to be winnable, and we're going to be much better for this experience. I mean, I think when I first come into it in 2018, we had Suriname, who are now touching pool 1, Martinique, who are very well respected team in the region. Then we had Turks and Caicos and Bonaire, and I was really looking forward to it when the draw was made. But now I've been in the region 2 years. When I look to the draw now, massively excited, firstly, about who we're playing. But it's tinged with the fact that I know if we're not absolutely as prepared as we can be, it could get really ugly for us. You know, you go in now and no illusions. So everything is about preparing as well as we can, looking at trying to get the extra 1%. Now, we're going to be able to play, it looks like, home games. We're going to be playing at the old stadium, but we haven't played a home game since 2018. And in international football, home advantage does make a difference.
Oh, it's absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, the fact that we can play home games, and I think we'll be well supported as well. You know, I think we'll be well supported on the island, you know, should fans be allowed in. Then that will definitely give us a big advantage, I think.
Do you, as the technical director, can you, for instance, get in contact and arrange money spinning friendlies? You know, COVID obviously has put a spanner in those works, but could you get, for instance, a Jamaica over to play if they've qualified for the World Cup and they're looking for friendlies? Would that be something that they would do in their eyes to give their guys a run up? But if I was you, I'd be thinking, well, we're gonna upset you here.
Yeah, I think we could get, you know, I think, you know, I've been in the region a while now. So Jamaica's technical director, Wendell Downswell, and their national team coach, I know them well. So yeah, I think that it wouldn't be impossible to get those types over. They're not really money spinners though, because traditionally you cover their costs. And when you've got a small stadium, if you look at the balance off, you know, I think you definitely want to play the friendly, but you're probably not going to come out in credit.
Yeah.
You know, by hand. But yeah, I mean, we'd love to play them. I mean, at the moment, we're being sort of realistic because we want to play Jamaica at a point where we think we can give them a really good go, and I think we would now. But you know, there's probably different challenges for us before we get to those type of games.
One thing's for sure, we'll be watching and we'll be spreading the word as well. You know, within our platform that we're building at the moment, we're building from the bottom, and you know, you're living proof that it can be done. We applaud you for what you're doing. We think it's absolutely commendable. Yeah, we've just got to keep our eye on it. We will try to get out there, and you have our word on that. We will, you know, get a shirt if we can from somewhere. If they've got if they've got a club shirt, you know, we'll have that BVI. Absolutely. I think it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, have you enjoyed it on the TTM podcast at all, Dan?
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, questions have been, you know, really, very well, like, researched, and excellent. Yeah.
Also, Dan, finally as well, the profile of the BVI is almost non-existent. And no disrespect. Found some of the research for this quite difficult. Now, what can you do to raise that? And is that in any way part of your thinking?
It's probably an indirect one, but the better we do, the more we accomplish, the more milestones we get past, the better our players are, the more our profile will grow. You know, at the moment, a lot of our work has been done below water level. So, you know, no one would necessarily too much pick up on it unless you're in the CONCACAF region. But, you know, as we grow, as we do better, as the players get better, as we pass milestones, and I think that should look after itself, really.
Absolutely.